Welcome back, everyone. This is Fignoli Smith from IronFX, and I'm here with the IronFX research team having a discussion about the Japanese economy, with our title being set as Economic Position of the Samurai. Next to me is Mr. Peter Yosef and Angelo Zidis, and they will be giving us their views on various questions. So sit back and enjoy. We're going to have an exciting seminar for you. Gentlemen, I'll start with Mr. Angelos. Could you please give me a brief overview of the development of the Japanese economy in the latest years, the last few years?
Yeah, well, we have to go back to see an overview. So we start from the 60s, and we saw their economy growing to 10%. In the 70s, it fell to 5%. In the 80s, to 4%. And in moving into the 90s, they faced some issues that we will discuss as we proceed. And these issues had some impact on the growth they were supposed to have.
Okay.
However, Japan is a dominant economic power in Asia, and they have a highly developed economy. That's all I'm going to say for now.
Okay, it's funny you should mention the 60s. I know, because I used to be in the automotive industry in the 60s, 1962 actually, a gentleman by the name of Jim Moran was signing an agreement with the then Toyota, trying to penetrate the market in the United States. And Mr. Moran owned a small gas station. When nobody else wanted to be part of anything having to do Japanese, he decided to sign an agreement with them to represent him in the Southeastern distribution. So he was the sole distributor for Toyota at that period. And needless to say, he became an icon in the United States and multi-millionaire, and very nice man, very nice story. Now, to proceed, let's start with Peter. What is the current position of the Japanese economy as you know it?
Well, the main indicators, first of all, the GDP is expected to slow down and actually reach plus 1.4% year on year for quarter one. The previous quarter 4 of 2010, had accelerated at plus 1.9% year on year. Now they're slowing down. The CPI rate for March was at 0.5% year on year, while it's definitely at low levels. If you consider that in February, it was at plus 0.2% year on year, and that's one of the main issues of the Japanese economy. Unemployment is another characteristic of the Japanese economy where it's very, very low. We have unemployment at the rate of 2.4%. In February, it was even lower. It was 2.3%. Mm-hmm. So practically, we are discussing about an economy which is working at full employment rate. Also, another characteristic of the Japanese economy is the high debt. If measured in relation to the GDP, the Japanese economy is indebted by 253%, and it's the highest ratio worldwide.
Okay. Well said. Angelos? What are the strongest sector in the Japanese economy, as you know?
We have to start first with the electronic industry. Now, this is a leading component of the industrial infrastructure of Japan. All right, they have explosive growth in the electronics. All right, and it's very rooted in the Japanese society. It's something that they enjoy, something that they really are into. Mm-hmm. That's why Tokyo is also called the electronic town.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
From there on, I would move to education. They have a very strong education sector. They have a literacy rate of 98%, which is very accurate.
Wow.
They believe in knowledge. They believe in education. School is compulsory from 6 to 15 years old, and they have a percentage over 95%. Mm-hmm. So you understand, a lot of people know how to read, know how to write, They really boost this industry, this sector, and this is something that they continue to invest in. They find new things for the education to grow.
Right.
There we have to move to trade. They have very strong exports, Japan. They mostly export cars. They have companies like Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Mitsubishi, Mazda, Subaru, Yamaha, Suzuki. And just to talk about Toyota, it sells vehicles to approximately 190 countries in various regions.
That is big.
Yeah, they really provide automobiles. Mm-hmm. However, there's a trick to it. We're going to come back to the automobile industry a little bit later. And then I would like to talk about the artificial intelligence and robots. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. This is a sector that they are aiming towards revolutionizing. It's a new sector, and they're investing a lot in it because they believe that the artificial intelligence and robotics can solve a lot of the country's problems they have currently. So they see it as an investment, but it's also an investment for problem solving,
right? Which
is a very smart way to resolve problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting. Before we used to have all these Chinese electronics, and the Japanese were the main exporter of electronics in the United States. I remember when I was younger, I had a car electronics shop, and everything was made in Japan, not in China. Uh-huh. But you're right once again. So let's move on. Peter, moving to the central bank, what is the BOJ's position currently?
Well, the BOJ, Bank of Japan, keeps an ultra-loose monetary policy, which is exactly aiming to boost practically stubbornly low inflation rate. The main characteristics of the bank's current monetary policy, would be the negative interest rate it keeps. It's at minus 0.10%, while at the same time the bank maintains a huge, very big, very large QQE program, which practically supports financially the economy directly.
Right.
It should be mentioned that up until now, the bank was not able to actually accelerate inflation, at least not yet.
Okay.
Policymakers usually see consumer sentiment as well as, I would dare to say, low wage increases as the main drivers behind low inflation. We could also mention that the bank has maintained this current ultra-loose monetary policy for over 3 years. And there have been warnings by economists that such an ultra-loose policy could have reverse effects on the economy, could create possibly speculative bubbles.
Okay.
And it's a big issue right now.
Okay.
Nevertheless, BOJ officials, especially BOJ Governor Kuroda, recently had showed decisiveness, determination to keep this supportive role for the economy in their efforts to reach the inflation rate of 2%, which is their main target.
Okay.
Most analysts still consider this as quite difficult, and maybe it's a long-term objective for the bank.
I hope they get it together.
Yeah.
Angelo, what do you think is the weakest link in the Japanese economy?
Yeah, we must say that it's the weakest links, but they're also very interesting. Quite surprisingly, they have an aging population that is increasing, while their workforce population, the young people, are basically diminishing. So they have a lot of people. They live many years as a
society.
As they live a lot, so they have a lot of people that are growing into the elders sector, and they have the workforce is basically becoming smaller and smaller. That's the problem. They may need to. They're trying to fix.
Do you think they have, based on that question, do you think they have a slow rate of birth?
At some point, they reached the point where the deaths were more than the babies born.
Wow. So because of their elders were getting older quicker.
Yeah, and that's a problem. That's something that they have to look into for the next decades.
Maybe we better have a word with Mr. Abe, huh? Give some conditions for young people to get busy.
From there on, we must say that they import their imports. 1/3 of their imports is about energy.
Okay.
It's about oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG.
Okay.
The thing is that they have increased costs on energy. They depend on oil.
Okay.
They basically are affected strongly by oil price fluctuation. So if prices are high, their economy is affected by it because they buy a lot of oil. Okay. And they have to turn to renewable energy or nuclear.
Yeah.
So they can diversify the energy basket they have.
Yeah.
But as I said, 1/3 of all their imports is oil and liquefied natural gas. To reduce costs would help them a lot.
Yeah.
Would be a very good investment. And then we have their automobile industry, which, as we said, is a very strong sector for them, but is under restructuring because now people are turning to environmental friendly cars, which are cars that work with batteries. Yeah. Cars that work with batteries are built different than the traditional cars that use fuel.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a kind of a restructuring of their automobile sector.
Beside the automobile sector, they also have the industrial heavy machinery industrial sector as well. Don't forget Komatsu, Kobato, very major competitors of Caterpillar and so on. Okay, now let's move to Mr. Peter. What are Japan's most important friendly international relationship in terms of business and trade? Is it China, America, or who?
Well, definitely, you already mentioned the first two. Starting with the Chinese are the biggest trading partner, as most Japanese exports go to China. We're talking about exports around $144 billion US. However, there have been worries about China, especially about China's growth.
Okay.
Chinese have been slowing down. Now they're stabilizing somewhat. Maybe they will be picking up pace in the second quarter, but for the time being, it's a little bit unstable, as it is the main trading partner of Japan. It's the nearest one anyway.
Okay.
The second biggest trading partner is the US, or has been the US in 2018 at least. However, we have tensions there as well.
Okay.
Because the US have explicitly mentioned the possibility of implementing tariffs on Japanese imports, especially cars. And that could hurt substantially the relationships between the US and Japan. Currently, the two sides are at negotiations. The outcome is a little bit uncertain, but most analysts are quite optimistic.
Okay.
I would like to mention, though, some less well-known trading partners of Japan. The one would be Canada.
Okay.
The Canadians rank number 17. However, they have very close relationships with Japan. They have a very tight relationship also in the Trans-Pacific Pact, as well as they are together at the G7 and the G20, which is, they're working very nicely together. The second would be Germany.
Okay.
Germany ranks as number 8 in Japanese exports, but still, and it was evident lately when Japanese Prime Minister Abe had visited Germany, they are trying to open up more in the EU and Germany. And actually the two countries were together calling for free trade lately and practically more or less against protectionism, as they're both very strong export-oriented countries.
I see. Okay. Why do you think the Japanese economy stuck in low inflation?
Low inflation. All right. To find what has happened, you have to revisit the past and what has happened in the past. So, because this is not something that happens in 1 year. Low inflation has been going on for some time. Now, they had sluggish economic growth since the 90s. The 90s were characterized as the Japan's lost decade. They had a real estate and stock market bubble. All right. And this was in the early 90s. So they had a very difficult start of the 90s. And their growth was terrible. From 1995 to 2002, they averaged 1.2% positive. But it's still very low for an economy the size of Japan. So after the burst of the bubbles, they've had Japan's monetary policy kicked in to save things, but they weren't able to do much because people have taken, basically real estate was devalued a lot and people had taken on too much debt. And the monetary policy could not save what had already been
done.
Yeah. So when they kicked in with the monetary policy, they made things even worse. After that, in the late 90s, they had a problem with the banks. They had banks failures. Approximately 181 banks closed. So all these things have not really let Japan grow.
Okay.
It's been holding them back.
Kind of dragging them down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've been great obstacles for the Japanese growth and the inflation, which is is related.
Yeah. Okay. Now then, a lot of people are talking about Abenomics. Okay, and these days now, prior they used to have the Reaganomics, but now they have the Abenomics. And what are Abenomics, and how do they affect the economy?
Abenomics are a set of strategies. They are based practically on 3 pillars. The Japanese call them the 3 arrows. The first would be dependent on monetary policy, the second would be dependent on fiscal policy, and the third would be dependent on structural reform. All are aligned to more or less boost private investment. Specific policies could include, for example, inflation targeting at 2%, which currently the BOJ already has. Or, say, for example, a correction in an excessive yen appreciation, more or less implying that the yen should be at low levels in comparison to other currencies. Setting negative interest rates, like currently BOJ has at minus 0.10%. Radical quantitative easing. Once again, BOJ has one of the largest quantitative easing programs worldwide. Expansion of public investment, which the government has more or less already enforced, especially in sectors like defense.
Okay.
The idea was practically to revive the Japanese economy. And we have to say, aggressive fiscal policy, aggressive monetary policy was used for that. Up until now, structural reforms are still in the making, but the elections of 2017 showed a strong support for Abe's ideas.
Okay.
So Abe, we could more or less say that Abe is rather on solid ground right now.
Whatever it's doing is working.
Now, financially speaking, GDP, a solid GDP growth, a solid inflation rate, or let's say a solid wage growth have proven still elusive. On the positive side, Abenomics were able to pull Japan out of deflation. However, they still have to provide the three named above.
I see. Okay. Just a reminder before we move to the next questions to our viewers that we're open to receive questions and inquiries while you are watching the webinar. If you have anything you would like to ask, you can go on chat and ask, and we will reply to you right away. Now, for the next questions, regarding Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister, okay? What plans does he have for the economy?
Well, actually, it's quite straightforward. Inflation at 2%, growth, solid growth, and at the same time, they are aiming and they're quite energetic in trying to push for a wage raise within companies. However, companies up until now, especially big corporations, have been quite reluctant,
right?
As they expect that the risk and flexibility, the risk will go up and flexibility will be reduced by rising costs. However, I would dare to say that another big issue which is heavily debated in Japan right now is a new sales tax. Actually, it's a raise of an existing sales tax which is planned by government Abe.
Okay.
Now, they have a consumption tax on sales which is more at 8%. The idea is to raise it to 10%, hike it. Such a hike was postponed twice until now in the Japanese economy. But the government is quite keen on it, and it seems to be the time of October, fall in general this year, that they will enforce it.
Okay.
Nevertheless, there has been speculation that it will be postponed once again because there's the idea of a new or a hike in the existing sales tax could endanger consumption. And by endangering consumption, practically, you could weaken inflation and Japan could be returning in a deflationary state.
I see. Okay.
We go back to inflation.
Deflation.
Yeah. Deflation.
Lower.
So it's a bit of a dilemma right now.
Well, smart people, I'm sure they'll get it together, as always. Now, Angelo, let's talk about the Japanese culture. You know? I travel a lot. I've never been to Japan. It's one of the places that I want to visit, you know, before the long journey home. It's sort of the bucket list. Okay. What is the Japanese culture about, and how does it affect the Japanese in businesses, for example?
So they're a very homogeneous society. They're prepared to work with their own people than have this polyethnic workforce like they do in the Europe or in the USA.
Yes.
And then from there, they put first the harmony of the group instead of the individual.
Right.
From there on, we move to the characteristics of the samurai.
Okay.
This is how we relate the title to the economy because they're so rooted. Basically, their history is from samurais.
Yes.
And all this strategy and all this wisdom, knowledge, they're all about honor. These are all characteristics of how they do business, how they treat their business partners, and how they treat their employees.
Yes.
They're very hardworking. They are the hardest workers.
Yes.
They've had problems because of this. The suicide rates increased because of hard working. And now they're trying to change this. They're trying to have a balance between your work life and your personal life.
Yes.
Because they understand that there has to be, well, not an equal time, but at least some hours per day.
Balance.
Yeah. And another fact that is very important for me is that they offer lifetime employment. lifetime employment is taking somebody at his mid-20s and retiring him at
Wow.
65.
Wow.
So employing him for 40 years.
Wow.
They like to take people, they train them, they develop them, they bring the creativity out, and they bring influence out of him. And then they stay with him. They require you to be honorable to them as well.
Of course.
But this is not seen like in Europe or in the US. From your 20s until your 60s, you might change 15 jobs.
It's more than that these days.
These people are the opposite. They like to stay with them,
Yes.
stay until they're retired,
Yes.
which is an awesome way to look at things.
Yes. I was making an interview with a young guy a couple of weeks ago, and we said to him, "Why you change jobs so many times?" He said, "Well, I'm young. You know what? I'm testing the ground." I was thinking to myself, "Are you kidding me?" It's funny when they would take people at their 20s and then keep them until they're 60. This guy would never fit in.
and this gives the employee some safety,
some sense of loyalty.
Yeah.
Yes, safety nets. Yes, some sense of longing as well, and wanting and needing, because they feel like, okay, if they pay that much attention to me, they must see something in me, you know, and they want me to be the best that I can be. Yeah. So this is very good.
And
very
they bring the best out of their out of their employees.
That's very good. Must be very, very happy employees. Yeah, it's good. Anyhow, let's move on. Peter, looking at the Japanese yen, it has been said that the JPY has a dual nature, one being a currency and the other as a safe haven for investors. How does this affect the course of the currency at this point?
Yeah, so of course it increases the complexity of trading the Japanese yen, as indeed the yen has a dual nature. On the one hand, as we mentioned, as the national currency of Japan, on the other hand, as a safe haven in times of crisis for investors. It would be evident that whenever we had a strong crisis or even slighter ones, we could mention the Japanese yen has been strengthening. Mm-hmm. And if we look at the chart we have prepared.
Very good.
What we're seeing here is the USD yen. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it would be there are two characteristics of the chart. The first is the reverse spike of the pair, which indicated the strengthening of the yen overnight on the 3rd of January, as Apple had announced that it would be having reduced revenue due to China's slowdown. Investors immediately turned to the Japanese yen, causing it to strengthen and spike. If we see near the end of the chart of the price action, then we see that the pair had opened, that was on this Monday, with a negative gap. That was a reaction of the market against strengthening the Japanese yen, which was caused by US President Trump, which stated that additional tariffs would be imposed on Chinese imports.
Okay.
And we saw practically investors trying to hedge against risk by investing on Japanese yen. Mm-hmm. Now, it's important to see that the USD yen has been approaching yesterday and today during near the 109.75 support line. It's quite a key support line, as it has been touched another 3 times in the past and always has bounced back. So we could say that should the Japanese yen be able to break that support line, we would expect the pair to drop heavier.
Interesting. For the traders out there, keep your eyes open. This thing is coming for opportunities.
You know, it's not. Yeah, but the yen is not only USD yen.
Okay.
There are a number of other pairs which could be created. Say, for example, Australian dollar.
Okay.
Against the yen, or GBP, the pound, or even the euro.
Okay. Because they're all related somehow.
Yeah, the trader should be thinking a little bit out of the box. see what options are available, which shows the strongest, say for example, trend line.
Yeah. Okay. You understand what Peter's saying is planning, diversifying, and manage your portfolio. Again, gentlemen, any other suggestion out there to those traders?
I think it would be nice to see before the yen, before any other suggestions, also the Nikkei.
Yes.
Because
I was going to mention that as well. Yes, the Nikkei.
It's also a very interesting trading instrument.
On that.
Angulos is an expert on that. Here we go.
All right, just some general info. Japan's Nikkei is the leading and most respected index of Japanese stocks. It's comprised of 225 stocks, thus the name Nikkei 225. The stocks are selected from domestic common stocks. All right, so some comments on the chart you are seeing. This is the daily chart of the Nikkei, and first of all, we notice an upward trend line that starts. We want to stay relevant to 2019, so this upward trend line starts exactly in January 2019. So it's been an upward movement. All right. On the 3rd of May, last Friday, the Nikkei touched its highest price in 2019.
Yeah.
Which makes it interesting because it was in a significant upward trend. Now, yesterday, some news that basically fears that were brought forward from the US Sino trade talks, that they may be having a fallout eventually, or some problems have arisen, or whatever. They've had, it was a drop. It was the biggest drop since April. And this has broken our upward trend line, basically.
I see.
And it's it seems to be temporary, but it has reversed this bullish momentum it had during the previous months, because it was the lowest closing level since the beginning of April, as I said, and it was basically due to things that happened that are not associated directly with Japan.
Yeah. But still affect Japan internally.
Affect Japan, but Japan is not the main
issue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I just want to talk about the levels here, and our resistance lines have been breached already in 2019 in May. All right. And that's our R1 21,665 and R2 21,890, and above that is the 22,185. Those resistance levels, as I said, have already been breached. However, if the index is to drop lower, we might see it move towards the 21,435, which is our first support level, and move even lower for the 21,180. But we want to see more of a bearish market if it's to reverse completely its momentum it had until now.
Wow.
And that's about it for the Nikkei.
That would be a big challenge. Okay. Gentlemen, any other suggestion as stated before for the traders?
Definitely traders which are trading the Japanese yen should be aware of the complexity of the currency. As once mentioned, it has a dual nature. At the same time, though, they should have a sound knowledge of the fundamentals as well as the financial releases affecting the yen. However, we should mention that the Japanese yen could be affected more by safe haven inflows and outflows, rather than the financial releases of Japan right now.
Okay.
As there is a more risk-averse sentiment among traders right now. So it's another thing which the average yen trader should be looking out for.
That's very good.
I would like to also add that traders should set their trades with their account possibilities and not set their trades upon what they expect.
Okay.
Make decisions on expectations, because that could be devastating.
Yeah.
So create a plan that suits their account, not what they believe will happen, because the market is not so easy to get right all the time.
Right. Yeah. Right. It takes a bit of work. That's what we're here for, to assist them and give them some basic knowledge to help them out. Gentlemen, thank you very much. As you know, IronFX will continue to provide a number of live seminars and webinars on various topics every couple of weeks in order to boost your trading potential. For more information and trading ideas, you can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us there as well. And share us, of course. This is Fignoli Ismail from IronFX, wishing you solid trading and a happy afternoon.